Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Arbitrarium. I'm here with our guest, David Perry.
Hello there!
Illustrator extraordinaire and a, adjunct lecturer at Indiana University, Purdue University of Indianapolis.
Among other talents.
Our producer for the evening, Brittany May.
Hi.
She'll mostly be hanging out in the background and telling us to get on with it when we hit a stopping point. So tonight's topic is Neuralink. They were recently in the news about a monkey playing a video game, the video game being Pong, with its brain, which I think is an incredible advancement of technology, and I believe Dave thinks is an evil virus of Satan. So,
not in those exact words, but, you know, it's pretty terrifying, I would say.
And why would you say that neural uplink technology is terrifying? We'll start with that.
Well, actually, I think it'd probably be a good idea to start with you explaining exactly what it is, because the people who are listening may not know that. So why don't you dive into that for a little bit?
Okay, if you don't know what Neuralink is a company founded by Elon Musk to create implants, starting with people who have disabilities, such as blindness, paralysis, that kind of thing, to get it into their brains, hook it up to a computer, and restore lost functionality. But that's just the start of it.
Yes, we haven't gotten into the mad scientist portion of Elon Musk, which we're all a little bit more familiar with, probably. Can I control flamethrowers with this?
Potentially.
Okay, that's a good selling point.
But the limits of this technology are kind of hard to find. Being able to directly neural link with anyone who has one of these things, along with any other computer system that exists and is connected to the internet, opens up a lot of avenues for learning, communication in general, and yeah, that kind of thing.
I know Kung Fu.
You could potentially know Kung Fu rather quickly.
So on a scale of 1 to Johnny Mnemonic, how much of a risk is there that we're going to be talking to dolphins?
Potentially, if a dolphin has a Neuralink and the software is rigged to, well, understand dolphin thought, then on a scale of 1 Johnny Mnemonic, we are at Neo.
Where does that fall?
With a spike in your head, so you can talk to things.
So you can talk to things. I can talk dolphin.
Wait, you mean I can dodge acting? So please share your thoughts, Dave.
Well, you got to make your case first. So you said that basically the more what do you say, benevolent uses for this is to help people who have lost brain function and to restore memories and things like that. Assuming that we
not memories, not necessarily memories.
Okay, maybe I misheard that. So what type of brain function are we talking about here? How deep are we talking when it comes to restoring brain function?
One example is loss of sight.
Okay.
So using this technology, you can bypass any kind of damaged optic nerve and stimulate the optical section of the brain directly, and without any clunky like eye augments that are direct, rip your eyeballs out, put a camera in there, that kind of thing.
Right. So is there some sort of like internet connectivity with this thing, for lack of better words? Is there like a is there an interconnectivity among neural links? I mean, we call it a neural link, so I'm wondering.
Potentially, and probably.
Is it avoidable? Because I like the idea of what this technology could possibly do, but I do not like the idea that it could be hacked.
Like Ghost in the Shell.
Yes. I'm a cartoonist. I fear many, many, many things.
You fear many, many things. As with any new technology, there's going to be risk. Period.
Next.
Anything can be abused.
That doesn't mean we don't stop things. It's a matter of how one, how easily they can be abused, and two, the level of catastrophe of how bad it would be if it were abused.
So, what is your worst case scenario here?
Worst case scenario, so we'll go full blown conspiracy theory here. Somewhere down the line, everybody ends up getting a Neuralink for one reason or another, and then because they're all interconnected, they have some sort of, for lack of better words, internet among them. One fail swoop of a program could potentially. Well, let me put it this way. Without even having technology like that, we already have technology that allows us to stimulate specific parts of the brain to get people to move in particular ways. It's not fine-tuned just yet, as far as I know, but as far as getting people to be literally physically behave in particular ways, we have at the very least the beginnings of the technology to do that. So the concern is, if these things can be hacked and if everyone is connected through these, what is the potential catastrophic danger of having a program that allows something like that to happen on a massive scale?
I mean, anything can be hacked, as far as I understand it. Anything one man can create, another man can get into. I'm not saying there's not risk involved. I just think that the benefits outweigh the risk, like any other technology. For instance, the first chain-reacting nuclear pile in the 1920s opened the door to nuclear reactors, but also nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Now, we've been responsible enough to not nuke ourselves out of existence, despite a few close calls. So you could come up with safeguards. And I don't know if that's in the form of a firewall or if there's just inherent security measures in the technology in and of itself, because everyone's brain is wired differently. A program that would work on one person might not necessarily work on another.
They're not wired that differently. I mean, maybe when it comes to specific chemicals and and the balance of those chemicals, but as far as motor cortex and things like that, they're essentially the same. I mean, they're located slightly differently. No brain is identical.
Right.
But, I mean, the technology that we have now that allows us to stimulate different parts of the motor cortex using magnetic pulses or whatever they call them, we scan for those particular areas.
Right. From what I understand, that technology that you're referencing is a magnetic resonance thing in the brain. Fact check that, if you would. That the way that they control people is they focus magnetic fields on certain parts of the brain to make them feel like they're falling in a certain direction, which makes them step in that direction to keep from falling.
That's one example, but they can actually have you move different parts of your body using that same technology. It's more refined than that.
Okay, pause.
So yeah, it's more refined than just stimulating an area and pushing them so that they, catch themselves. It's more refined than that. We can actually have, like, as an example, I was listening to an audiobook where they were talking about an incident where he had, the big ring thing around his head, and the dude was using the wand to find the area, and when he did, he stimulated it, and what it did was, it took a minute. This was testing to try and find the right location of his motor cortex, and once it did, his pinky started to move, right? And it just kept moving until it was, like, completely uncontrollable. And they can do that with just about any part of your body once they locate the proper area in your motor cortex.
Yeah, it sounds remarkably unrefined. Like, we can make you move it, but we can't make you do anything with it useful.
Maybe not necessarily just yet.
I mean,
now,
exactly.
the actual purpose of this particular test had nothing to do with the motor cortex thing. That was a test to get to navigate the area properly. What it was actually intended to do, and what it successfully did, was essentially suppress the amygdala to a certain extent. The idea was
and the amygdala is?
That's the emotion control center of the brain. And the purpose was to have this person experience the brain of a psychopath, and it worked for about, I think it was 20 minutes or so, something along those lines, and it worked.
How did they test that it's the brain of a psychopath versus, I don't know,
Because they had a psychopath there.
all right, diagnosed psychopath. You
Yes.
can cross-reference right then and there.
Long diagnosed psychopath, functioning psychopath.
Where do you source a psychopath these days?
Scientists. Well, this particular source was
Like the scientists themselves are psychopaths?
what is the guy's name? I listened to the whole damn audiobook and I'm trying to remember his name. Kevin Ditton, I believe is his name. Ditton, I think is his name. The Wisdom of Psychopaths. That's something you can fact check pretty easy.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so this is more like
Yeah, Kevin Dutton.
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 There you go. Kevin
Kevin
Dutton
Dutton.
wrote a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, and toward the end of the book, that was an experiment that they did. And basically what they did was, if I remember correctly, they had a series of images on screen. Most of them, if I recall correctly, were, pretty mundane and good feeling. And then sometimes they would show these extreme, violence and these really loud noises and things like that. And somebody who has essentially the low functioning amygdala, as in a psychopath, then
so they
their brains don't activate the same way. The amygdala doesn't activate the same way. In fact, in certain psychopaths, it actually drops them into like this weird sort of calm, like Zen zone.
Psychozone.
When things get particularly bad, yeah. Their brains literally do the opposite of what most people's do, which is heightened. Now, they actually do have heightened awareness, but it's like one of the early examples that he gives in that one has to do with a surgeon and checking the brain waves of a surgeon using a
KG?
fMRI.
fMRI?
Yeah,
Okay.
using an fMRI and that's one of the first examples he gives of that, which is instead of the, anxiety rising and the blood pressure rising, the heart rate rising, the pulse rate rising, all that stuff, it actually does the exact opposite. So, and that makes sense because one of the, I'm getting kind of off topic here, but one of the, the primary sort of sales pitch that the book is giving with the title like The Wisdom of Psychopaths is, a certain amount of psychopathy is actually beneficial and can be a predictor of success.
I mean, makes sense to me.
Yeah. So
If you're not hindered by emotions, you can. Well,
there's a limit.
yeah. Well, yeah, of
There's a
course,
limit.
but you still need to be able to function in society, which
Yeah.
requires some emotional connection to people around you.
Right.
But if you're less hindered, you can explore avenues that other people wouldn't even think to.
Now, there's another question I would have. This might be kind of out there even for this particular topic, but how much risk is there in brain function bleed? And the reason
Explain
what I
you
mean
mean by that, 'cause
what I
I
mean
don't-
by that is the issue that we have with social media right now is sort of this how it just sort of builds this anxiety and contention and all these things, and it just sort of spreads like wildfire, right? What is the risk of having a similar effect through these neural links? Let's say you do have somebody that's hooked up to the Neuralink, and one of them just happens to be the type of psychopath that has all the dials dialed up. What is the risk of
so
there
you're-
being like an infection,
So,
for lack of better words?
Same as being hacked. And one thing that I was going to touch on earlier with the way that these things have to work is your individual neurons are not set up the way anyone else's individual neurons are. In order for this thing to work, it actually has to learn, which means its algorithms are going to be changing on the fly to adapt to your physiology and the way your brain works, the way you work. So you combine a learning system to I wouldn't say randomized, but very much unique setup to a brain, and you end up with something that's very hard to hack in the first place. Because there is no one size fits all. And I had a second point and then I forgot.
What about the risk of an emergent consciousness?
Risk of an emergent consciousness?
An emergent consciousness, yeah.
As in an AI developing inside your Neuralink? We'll explore that in a minute after a word from our sponsor.
Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies.
This program is brought to you by Wolf Government brand anchovies. Founded in 2018, Wolf Government has been providing the world with premium quality fish in a can for over 30 years. Little salty fish, big wolf taste.
So you asked about emergent consciousness inside the Neuralink. That is the eventual goal. To have an AI that in essence bonds with you.
With you or with us?
With you specifically. Where it would be more like your arm is part of you but it's not you. Or your neocortex is part of you, but it's not you in entirety. In essence, the end goal of Neuralink is to provide a fourth part of the brain. You've got your limbic system, your cerebellum, and your neocortex, right?
Sure.
The end goal of brain interface technology is to provide, I'm going to call it a technocortex.
But you're calling it an AI, so it's basically like another consciousness in your head.
Think of it as an AI that is also you. Because it has to be you to interact with you in your brain.
See, that's pretty unclear. When you say that it's an AI that is me but is also not me, that's not a good sales pitch for this. You're basically telling me, oh, well, there's a person in your head. It's not really you, but you're going to think it's you. I don't like
Well, it's more, it would grow to be more of an extension of your own neocortex.
But we're talking about an AI, a separate consciousness that
Yes.
is not mine.
In order for the technology to work, there would have to be machine learning and AI technology inside the technocortex, as I'm going to call it from now on.
Okay, so what kind of explicit relationship do I have with this AI that's in my brain that is and is not me?
What explicit relationship do you have with your hand?
My hand doesn't think for itself.
Neither does it.
You said it was an AI, which implies that it thinks for itself.
Okay. Now you're getting into the difference between sapience and sentience. Something can be sapient and not sentient, right?
Okay, so explain the level of consciousness of this AI to me then.
It's not in and of itself self-aware. So, okay. You could make, it'd be a very hard argument, but you could make the argument that a computer is sapient. It does calculations. We could call that thinking, right?
Okay.
The computer itself is not aware. It has no sense of itself. It's a computer. Mm-hmm. But you could say that it is sapient. It does think in a way, right?
All right.
Humans are sapient and sentient. We recognize ourselves as separate from the universe.
So to simplify this, are you basically saying that it's imagining your computer, or your laptop, or your desktop, but in your head? But in your head.
Yes. With
Okay.
a lot more safety features just by its inherent design. Only way to make it work.
Who's designing it? Why should I trust them?
Well, we know Neuralink, the company, is designing it. Why should you trust them? That's up to you. I mean, why do you trust any company, any institution of any type?
Well, because most other companies, and by which I mean pretty much all other companies, are not trying to implant a separate consciousness into my brain. That's not the sales pitch for most other companies.
No.
I trust
but,
Kroger because they're not jamming groceries into my brain.
I mean, they kind of are, if you really think about advertising. But
But then if you really, really think about advertising, they're not.
I mean, I'm not expecting anyone
There's a difference between
run up and
persuasion.
and slam a baguette through your ear. But
No, I'd have to pay a lot of money for something like that.
I think we all would. Baguette. I haven't eaten today, so anything food kind of. That's why I wolf those down.
Oh.
I was preparing for all this stuff, man.
So I got to leg up on you. I got food in my stomach and brain's working good.
Yeah. Apparently. Allegedly. There we go.
You know, for somebody with a pretty large vocabulary, my memory recall for those words is fucking atrocious. We'll edit that out.
Yeah. Edit that in post.
Fix it in post.
Okay, so you trust Kroger because they're not trying to cram groceries into your brain, which would kill you. I mean, I don't know of very many people who have a tuna can slammed through their skull that end up surviving that.
Also, you know, eggplants aren't particularly hackable.
Not that you're aware of.
There's something they're not telling me about my groceries.
Reminds me of Coneheads. All right. So, why should you trust someone to put a electrode in your brain?
An artificial intelligence in my brain
Right.
that they can connect to.
That they can connect to.
Presumably, I mean, if we're talking about essentially an emergent AI. I guess my question is how, first we need to establish how connected is the link in Neuralink? Are people connected?
As of right now, it is a read-only. Meaning it can't write anything to your neurons. Which is what they're working on for the medical aspect of it. Because that's going to have to be able to write to neurons in order to make it work. Like the monkey that's controlling a Pong game, that is read-only. It's just right under the skin. I think. I don't know if that's under the skin or if it's above. It's in its, or the little tendrils are in the brain. Tendrils not a very good word for it, but but it's simply reading a portion of the brain that the monkey had to teach itself to do. It's like if you were to hook yourself up to one right now, you wouldn't be able to do much with it because you need to learn how to use it. Well, and the machine needs to learn how to not use you, but understand what you're telling it to do.
Right, but for most people, it's not really as much of an issue of what it's capable of doing now. It's what it might be capable of doing in the future.
Right.
And who would have control over what those capabilities are and whether or not at any point it would be required to have these. So
the thing that you're really worried about, in a nutshell, is
the unforeseeable future.
Well, we're all worried about that. You're worried about specifically just losing yourself to this thing.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And generally not by choice. If somebody's doing it by choice, then it's like that's their choice. But at what point is it possible that it would no longer be their choice? What are the odds of this ever being required, of it being hacked into? I mean, once we get to the point where the technology can actually functionally... Well, you know, we don't even have to go as far as... we don't have to go as far as making people literally walk in a particular direction or, you know, forcibly make them goose step down the street. Although that would be kind of funny. We don't even have to go that far. What are the odds that something like this could cause, if hacked or programmed in a particular way, could cause a stroke?
Okay. So the prospect of assassination.
Yes.
That would depend on the actual architecture of the technology in its final form, which we're still kind of out there. I mean, who was it that was assassinated with a pacemaker recently?
Oh, yeah.
Within the past 10 years.
That would probably be an easy one to fact check.
Yeah, assassinated via pacemaker hack.
I remember hearing something about that. So it's these types of things, these types of conspiratorial questions that, people who would support this type of technology would, sort of wave their hand and say, oh, well, you're just being paranoid. But we have very recent examples of how conspiracies aren't always crazy.
Well, yeah.
In fact, it's when they're not particularly crazy that we get particularly conspiratorial. Sort of rolls downhill, too. Once a crazy conspiracy turns out to be true, then it's like, well, what else might be true? We don't know, and that's the problem.
Yeah, it's.
And I'm not a particularly conspiracy theory sort of person. I actively avoid that.
Maybe you should start looking into them a bit.
See, this is how it starts.
Well, if you can look into conspiracies that have existed.
This just sent Garrett as an analog Neuralink.
What? I assure you, I am quite squishy. Not. What was I saying?
Oh, they've gotten to you.
I don't even have the thing yet. So, and now I forgot what I was saying. My thinking chopsticks are helping me, not at all. Let me put those down.
Actually, it is not known if anyone has ever been injured or killed due to an implant hack. I'm not seeing anything that points to an actual victim of hacked implant causing them to be murdered.
What's your source on that one?
New Scientist. I don't know.
Not familiar.
When was that published?
This was published in 2014. I'm a bad fact checker.
What's wrong with the laptop? Is it?
It doesn't type. It's messed up, so I can't use it.
That's fine. We can continue while she's getting
keyboard doesn't work apparently.
It's not your keyboard. It's your clock is behind. It won't let me Google anything until your clock is updated.
We're suffering technical difficulties, if you can't tell, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
So you're terrified of getting brain hacked.
Yes, I am. Quite.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's a real possibility. Just like anything bad happening to you is a very real possibility.
Yeah, but this isn't like anything bad happening to you. This is like really bad things happening to you. This isn't like walking down the sidewalk and tripping on a dog turd.
How is this?
That would be a particularly hard dog turd.
How is this any worse than someone breaking into your house and flat out murdering you?
Well,
I mean, at that point, you get hacked. You're not you anymore. You are effectively dead.
Yeah, but you're also not anybody else.
And if you are flat out murdered,
that's what I'm saying. If you're flat out murdered, you are not anybody else. If you get hacked, there's no real telling what sorts of actions you might be convinced of performing if you have this secondary AI in your brain
you
and
wouldn't
it gets
be
hacked.
You anymore, is the thing.
All right, what about the odds of, let's say somewhere down the road, everybody has these things. What about the odds of somebody claiming that they did it because of the brain implant? And maybe that's not the case.
I can't give you odds on that. You're asking me.
What I'm doing is trying to give you the mountain of problems that most people are going to consider when it comes to, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
And that's something that each person's going to have to make up for themselves.
If
the
they're
thing
able
that
to.
I will always sit down and no, we do not go this far, is if they are mandated.
Right. That is one concern.
Yeah. That's like, okay.
But maybe they don't have to be mandated. It's not mandatory that you have internet access.
Right.
But in order to live in our society to the same extent that the vast majority of people do, you need to be on the internet.
Well, you could go out in the mountains and decide to build your own cabin and that kind of thing.
Come on.
There are other ways to live that don't involve the internet.
There are, but you know what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
The majority of people
in society on the level that most people do,
you might end up functionally having to have this Neuralink. That's soft. That would be the soft power way of getting everyone to have this thing, or at least most certainly enough people to, if you were to create your brain hack army of, followers or whatever they happen to be, you'd have more than
You'd
enough.
go down as one of the greatest mass murderers in history.
Not if there's any... See, who's writing the history books, though, at that point?
Yeah, fun fact, it's not always the victors that write the history books.
No. No, we're actually feeling the weight of that now.
Yeah, good example is pretty much anything written about the Wehrmacht during World War II. Those were written by the Wehrmacht. Or members of the Wehrmacht. So the losers do, in fact, sometimes write history.
Yes. The New Testament.
They ended up winning.
That's true, they did end up winning. They ended up winning pretty good.
Yeah. It's about time for another word from our sponsors.
Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies. Wolf Government brand anchovies.
This program is brought to you by Wolf Government brand anchovies. Liven up your pizzas, salads, and s'mores with Wolf Government brand anchovies. Little salty fish, big wolf taste.
Okay, so you were trying to sell me on assimilation. And how it is futile or something like that, I believe.
I don't think it's futile.
Well, assimilation is not futile. Resistance. Resistance would be futile.
No, resistance is never really futile. Even if it's token, at least there's something to it.
Tolkien.
We got the wine opener out.
Yep.
This is either going to go really well or it's going to go really poorly.
Works for Dave Rubin.
Well, he's kind of a level above us right now.
Just a few.
Yeah.
We were discussing trying to set up a studio space in the garage, so just following in Rubin's footsteps, essentially.
I'm
What
thinking
is
the
going
tool
on with
shed's
this
going to be
thing?
better.
It could be.
It's separate from the house. It's going to be quieter,
True.
I think.
Well, once you get the insulation in, it'll definitely be quieter.
Oh,
Heater in?
oh well, yeah. It's wired for electric. You can put anything we
Oh,
want in
I'm
there.
really screwing up this cord.
Yeah, you.
It looked like it was
murdering it.
going in there straight, but it didn't. Yeah, that's ugly.
Okay, so that's going to show up on the recording. That squeaky noise.
Yeah, a little bit.
I don't like that.
It's not going to be that loud. This is a high quality recording
You're
and a
high
low quality
recording.
wine.
So
You son of a bitch!
I've said earlier that I think that the benefits outweigh the possible risks. I think the biggest
Okay, well let's outline some of those things.
outline some of the.
Benefit, pros and cons. We'll do pros and cons.
All right. Pro, potential for perfect communication between any two individuals. Because words, as useful as they are, don't perfectly translate to what you're thinking into someone else's brain.
Thank you, Derrida.
You'll never mention that name in my house again. But it's a fact of linguistics.
It is true. That is a fact of linguistics. But in order to get to that point, you have to be pretty much perfectly interconnected with this Neuralink, right? So then we get back to the con of everyone being... I mean, what are we creating here? We're basically creating... It seems like we're creating somewhat of a hive mind.
It could be a hive mind.
Humanity, the internet.
Argument could be made that we're already a what's it called? A hive mind of sorts. There's another word I was thinking of.
If the future of the species is essentially Wikipedia, I want no part of it. Con. Wiki future.
Wiki future. I don't quite understand what you mean by if the entire human race is Wikipedia, but
Here's another issue. If we're all connected with this sort of Neuralink, and we're sort of existing and thinking, we're sort of communicating through technological telepathy, essentially, is kind of what we're talking about
Yeah.
here, right? What about in the realm of hacking? What about the? We're not even going as far into the conspiracy as your brain being taken over by some megalomaniac hacker. But what about the little bitty hacker guys who are creating programs so that you can read people's minds without them knowing it?
So, forced, covert or even overt mind reading?
Yes. Less conspiratorial, possibly more possible.
So you're talking about the death of secrets, in essence?
To an extent, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not...
That could be an arms race that leads to everyone having that sort of overt public communication. Right? Then at that point, we're all reading each other's minds because it was essentially an arms race to read each other's minds. You have one person reading someone else's mind, and people find out that that's possible, and they're like, well, I want that. I want to be able to read that person's mind. It's that same issue of, you don't have to have internet access to be alive, but most people have internet access to function in modern society. What about all these little arms races that lead us up to those types of things?
I suppose that'd be up to the individual. I mean, this would come down to social norms, man. If it comes out, if for whatever reason it's acceptable in society to read someone else's mind, and then everyone's probably going to be doing it. But if it's not acceptable to read other people's minds, it's like you could go read through someone's mail. It's not a good idea, and it's a crime.
Are you suggesting that it's unreasonable to think that on a long enough timeline that it isn't inevitable that we would get to that point?
Well, just because something gets to that point doesn't mean it...
It seems like a slippery slope. Like, how reversible is something like that, though?
Don't know. I mean, going back to the social norms thing, it was acceptable to masturbate publicly in the Colosseum of Rome. That was considered perfectly normal behavior. But nowadays, not so much.
I feel like that's a false equivalence. This is the nature of this type of technology makes it almost incomparable to any other example. Because of the level of catastrophe that seems like a slippery slope to inevitability.
Many people think the same things about, again, nuclear power. Just because we've avoided one nuclear catastrophe doesn't mean we're not headed straight into another one.
That's true, but we also have...
Nuclear power is a very powerful technology. So is this.
That's true, but we also have separate consciousnesses who are negotiating with each other over to make sure that, at least to some extent, we're not destroying each other.
And with Neuralink, you can have better communication. You don't have to guess about the meaning of the words. You know exactly what they mean. It would make that negotiation easier.
Oh, yeah, well, you don't need to negotiate if it's your own brain. You don't need to negotiate if everybody is sharing the same brain, do you?
How are you sharing the same brain?
Well, it seems like
is everyone sharing the same computer on the internet?
If we're talking about like a singularity of communication, essentially, is kind of what we're talking about here. What is the logical extreme to that? The absolute eradication of differentiation of thought.
I don't see that happening. I don't see that possible, really. Just because, you've got twins grow up in the same place. Genetics are identical. For all practical purposes, genetics are identical. Same upbringing, radically different outlooks.
Well, their experiences are different.
Right. Your experiences are going to be different from mine, even if we have Neuralink.
Maybe not necessarily, because even
if you can experience my memories, you're going to be interpreting them differently, just from your own individual experience.
Not necessarily, because interpretation isn't strictly. When somebody's interpreting something, they have a mechanism. They have a system, a mechanism for interpreting it. If that mechanism is based in the same mechanism that somebody else's is, then they're going to interpret that separate experience the same way that somebody else would a million miles away. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't understand what you're saying.
The mechanism for for interpreting a situation would be the same from person to person, right?
Only if you believe that this would be the death of experience.
It wouldn't be the death of experience, it would be the collection of experience. But it would be essentially one large mind experiencing it in different places.
Yeah, which would create different outlooks from those different places.
They would converge. Because the processor is the same.
No, the processor is inherently different.
No, if I'm saying if everyone is connected by this Neuralink, the processor, once we get to this,
Well, you're saying
this
that the
point
Neuralink is the processor itself. No, the individual is a processor for their own experience. It's going to be different from anyone else's, and they might be able to share that directly through Neuralink, but having a different experience to lay upon someone else's is going to interpret that differently.
My concern is the emergent...
At the cellular neural level, it's going to be different.
I don't know about that.
So you're basically, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're implying is that this would make everyone's brain the same.
Near enough to processing experience the same that there wouldn't be a question of... There wouldn't necessarily be a morally differentiated question about the experience itself. All it is essentially one large mind. It would be one large mind separated into a lot of different areas, but still bringing that information to the same location and processing it because everybody is using the same processor at that point.
No.
It's like you have the emergent AI, which is the Neuralink itself.
No.
That's the concern.
You're concerned that each one of the little technocortexes
are like fingers for this thing.
Will just come together, and then all the technocortexes will be the same.
I'm asking about the risk of an emergent AI becoming that thing, and then each individual person being more like a finger for that hive, that brain, that collective AI brain that has become emergent. So humans become internet, and then become the internet's fingers.
Okay, so you're afraid of this thing becoming a top-down.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not concerned about that.
Why?
Because from the very architecture that it is built from, it has to be bottom-up.
Why?
Again, it goes back to that each individual processor will have different experiences. Even if it sends up something that is more or less uniform, it's going to be different. And by the very nature of the thing, you don't want all the little tendrils being the same. Each one of them has to be different, or you don't end up with something useful.
Why does it need to be necessarily useful?
Well, if it's not useful, it...
Okay, well, what would be useful to that sort of AI?
Well, it would depend on what it wants to do, and we're assuming, again, that this thing is sentient.
Right.
So
that
you're
has
afraid of it
emergent
becoming sentient,
That's
not just
one
sapient.
possible concern.
Because the only way that this would become a threat...
That's what I mean by emergent intelligence. It's not...
It becomes sentient, not just sapient.
Right. Well, I guess maybe it wouldn't be necessarily... Okay, semantics. It wouldn't
Well,
necessarily be emergent intelligence because each individual part is itself intelligent, and then you have a mass intelligence that...
Kind of sounds like society, if you ask me.
To an extent, but in society you still have separate brains functioning completely separate from each other, experiencing things completely separate from each other.
That's not true at all.
Functionally, as compared to this Neuralink that we're talking about, those are different things.
No, everything you've learned in school, chances, unless it was personally experienced by you, that was someone else's experience. Now, it's filtered differently. It's not a pure...
We recognize it as someone else's experience, and therefore we are able to question it.
And you're saying that this would not be... an experience upload would not be considered as separate experience from your own.
We would be less likely to question the experiences of others because we're acknowledging this this top-down AI as part of us. See, what I'm saying is,
well,
when you're let's use a public forum as an example. Something like Facebook is probably a really good example. You have different people who've experienced different things coming together and arguing about things essentially because they have different experiences and they're processing it their experiences as distinct from somebody else's experiences. So they're more likely to question those other people's experiences. Well,
And
if
what
they're
are they
Neuralink,
questioning?
it could be anything.
Well, primarily what
argument.
they're primarily going to be questioning is the veracity of the experience, right?
What do you mean specifically by that?
Is this a true account?
Yeah, I mean, that would be part of it. I mean, I'd say that's
primarily what
probably
it
the
is.
basis of it. Is this a true experience? Right? Mm-hmm. But when you have a collective, we'll say something like a hive mind, which is the concern I'm having here, that thing becomes... What's a good way to put this? Psychologically, it becomes a part of you, and therefore you are less likely to question it if it is wrong.
Okay.
That's a problem. And then you have everyone doing this. Everyone's connected to this thing, and so we start to feel as if it is inherently a part of us. So we're less likely to question what it does, when it does it, and the experiences that we're being fed from those other little fingers from other people. Because emotionally and psychologically, we're experiencing it as if it's basically our experience. Because if we didn't, it'd be kind of useless to have that system anyway. But that would be the idea, is that you can gather a lot of information about the environment, and, for lack of better words, we'll say you're trying to gather information about the universe. Like this is an AI that's trying to understand its place in the universe, and it's doing that by having all of its little fingers as these different people. It's making these experiences and sending them back. Right, it's a macroorganism. That's essentially what I'm kind of getting at here. And you're having a situation...
That's the word I was looking for earlier.
Macroorganism?
Yes.
Okay.
We're already kind of a macroorganism.
You're playing with semantics a little bit fast and loose there.
Well, I mean, going back to what I was getting at earlier, what people are primarily questioning with any experience put onto Facebook that they're arguing over, they're questioning the veracity of it.
Well,
What if you knew that was a true account?
No, they're not. They're not questioning. The more I think about that, they're not questioning the veracity of it. They're implying, more often than not, they're implying that it's probably not true, only because it's not theirs. That's how most people function. Anybody who's ever been in a Facebook argument or a social media argument knows that. It doesn't actually have to do with whether or not it's true. And we'll pause on that. And we're going to go to our sponsor, who I'm being told now has annexed the tool shed.
Damn it, wolf government.
Wolf government brand anchovies. Wolf government brand anchovies. Wolf government brand anchovies. Wolf government brand anchovies.
This program is brought to you by Wolf Government Brand Anchovies, gluten-free, keto-friendly, and unsustainably harvested by the Texas State Gaming Commission. Little salty fish, big wolf taste.
As an aside, we've discovered something among the Google search results.
Breaking news.
Brittany, 4 pizza cupcakes.
Okay, so I was just looking at, I'm on the info machine ready to fact check whatever these guys need me to fact check, and I just happened to see among the trending searches right now is a thing that caught my eye, the pizza cupcake Shark Tank. Now, I don't watch Shark Tank, so I'm not really, up to date on the trends in this show, but pizza cupcake caught my eye because I'd never heard of such a thing. So now I'm just kind of going through the Google results, just kind of looking at what we got. It's like, you've got the pizza cupcake on Shark Tank, 5 facts you need to know. Or
Bold of you to assume I care.
yeah. Pizza cupcake on Shark Tank, where are they now? It's like...
I'm just imagining somebody who pitched on Shark Tank now, like, they just, gained 50 pounds and, addicted to meth or something. It's like, yeah, well.
They're addicted to pizza cupcakes at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just picturing basically a tiny Chicago-style pizza. I mean, that's all it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, should I look up some images? I don't really know what this is all about.
Well, that's quite insensitive to the listeners.
Yeah, they can't see the glory of the pizza.
Oh, this is just for my own edification. But yeah, it literally just looks like, like they put some pizza dough in a cupcake tin and then put some sauce and toppings and stuff and then baked it. pretty self-explanatory, I guess.
Yeah, it's
I
pizza
just
quiche.
don't know what it has to do with Shark Tank. What is Shark Tank?
It's a show where they pitch
Business
ideas to investors.
So it
Yeah.
doesn't actually have to do with aquariums that are full of sharks?
No, it hasn't.
No, although that would make it watchable.
That's what I thought.
Oh, there you go. Go on Shark Tank and pitch that they changed their entire format of Shark Tank to literal sharks on a tank, and if they don't give you the thumbs up, you get fed to the sharks.
This makes so much more sense. That was where my confusion lies. I didn't realize that the show Shark Tank was not actually about sharks and tanks.
No, that's actually better. That's a better show. That's a better show.
Yeah, now it just seems kind of boring.
And I love the irony of pitching that to the show itself. It's like, this is not interesting. What we're doing here right now is not interesting enough, so here's my idea.
Oh, okay. Well, pizza cupcakes, Shark Tank. That's a thing. It's one of the top Google searches, apparently.
All right, so where were we? We were talking about social media and...
Again, what you said was they're implying the non-veracity of the experience.
Yes, that's basically. I mean, it's not that it's necessarily an active thing. It's just they're going into it with that because they're particularly interested in getting across what it is that they know without absorbing what it is someone else knows, because there's this sort of, what it seems to me is there's this sort of fear that whatever that other information is somehow going to infect them and change the way that they think in a way that they will no longer, in some essence, be themselves. That sounds really, really strange, but I think if you really broke it down based on the way that these people behave in these situations, that's probably what it would be.
It sounds like that's what you're afraid of with Neuralink.
Yes, to an extent, although that's a much more literal and direct example of it than just social media arguments. I can always step away from Facebook and be like, okay, I need to get my thoughts together. I can't do that with something like this, because if I try to step away from that, I'm going to be like, okay, I need to get our thoughts together. Those are already my thoughts. I'm not even questioning it at that point. I don't have any incentive to deny the possibility of something being true or not if it's coming from essentially some distant brain that I feel is a part of me. So I am less likely to question it.
Again, you're imposing this top-down thing, where you feel that brain is part of you when it's not.
What I'm saying is that my concern is that it could become that. And you're saying, and your argument thus far about those types of concerns have basically been, well, yeah, I mean, there's always a possibility that this could be unbelievably catastrophic, but you take your risks. It's like, we don't have to. The idea of assessing these particular types of problems and the mountain of possible catastrophic results or consequences of it would help us understand whether or not it's a good idea to even open that Pandora's box.
So,
but then there's also the argument
risk involved of I'm going to assume what you're talking about is human extinction, in essence, as like the catastrophic thing.
And essence is a very important phrase there. Because it's not that humans are actually going to be extinct. Humans as we know it might be, because we wouldn't be humans with an S anymore. We would be human.
Well, going back to that, if
Legion.
you are reprogrammed, you are no longer you. You are effectively dead, right?
Oh God, that's going to get so deep into semantics.
Well, at that point we're talking about what is identity, which is a
Right.
whole other can of worms.
That's the problem. I mean, essentially, you would no longer be you. You would be part of the us. Right? I mean, at that point, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the assimilation into a hive mind. We're going full Borg here.
Okay. And when specifically
I don't
what you're
want to
afraid
be
of,
Borg, and therefore...
well, it sounds like you... The big part that you are really, really railing against is not being able to withdraw from it.
That is a
if
big
you so
part of
choose.
it. Absolutely. I don't like the idea of being...
And what's to stop you from just turning the thing off when you're done and you want to be done with it?
Can I? Is it possible for me to turn it off?
I mean, it would depend on the architecture, but you are still you. You have a new part of your brain, in essence, but...
My concern, like I mentioned before, my concern, as far as trying to clarify the slippery slope here, right? My concern isn't
you're
even
making
as
a lot
much
of assumptions on this. That's my...
Well, I'm trying. What I'm trying to do is connect this in a way that it doesn't. That it's clearly not just assumptions, but an assessment of what is likely to happen over a certain amount of time. That's what I'm attempting to do.
What you're doing is what is possible. That's
yes, but what I'm saying...
Likely and possible are not the same thing.
Okay, well, here's the next thing I'm going to say about that. I kind of mentioned it a little bit, but to kind of bridge that gap between possible and likely, again, I'm going to bring up the maybe it's not mandatory, but in order to function in a society that develops with Neuralink, you might have to become a part of that Neuralink in order to function successfely. Maybe even as a human being at that point.
Well,
within a society,
from what you're arguing,
right, and then
at
each
point,
successive step, each successive leap in the pervasiveness of the technology, the more and more people get that element of the technology, the more and more people are going to have that element of the technology. So that's where I'm saying, we can talk about what's possible, and that is possible, but now we're talking about, okay, not only is it possible, how likely is it? And it seems pretty likely to me.
Okay. But you're...
Did I win?
No.
Moderator.
I think we still have some time on the clock.
It also sounds like what you're saying there is you get this, you're not necessarily human.
At a certain point.
At what point do you cease to become human having a Neuralink?
Okay. If you're able to do a Neuralink, right, and not have it interconnected with other people's brains, right? If that is not even a function of your Neuralink. And at that point, I wouldn't even call it necessarily Neuralink. I think that might be a bit of a misnomer. I mean,
you're still linking to other technology.
Right, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's not, but at the same time, when somebody hears the word Neuralink, they're going to immediately, because we live in the internet age, get this image of their brain being connected to other brains. Right. I mean, I think that's going to be something that people immediately think about when they hear that term, and here's some of the plans that are involved in developing that technology. So, but that's a semantic thing. We don't want to dive too deep into that. But if you're able to have a Neuralink that is essentially literally just yours, like it's not connected to anybody else's brain or anything like that, you also at that point still have to assume, give the benefit of the doubt that this thing that is in your head, even though it's not connected to other people's brains, is not imminently hackable by someone who developed the technology in the first place. You won't know that. And I'd say it seems likely that a backdoor is going to be built into it, because a backdoor is always built into it. You know that.
I don't know always, but most certainly often.
Right. Again, possible or likely seems likely. So even giving the developers the benefit of the doubt that they didn't build in a backdoor so they can jump into your brain whenever they feel like it, then you would still be you. And you also have to assume that, okay, we should probably also have the ability to turn it off if we're going to maintain any sort of autonomy in contrast to this piece of technology. So let's give them even more of a benefit of the doubt. It's built with a button or an off switch or whatever you want to call it.
Take the batteries out.
The person could... It's in my brain. I don't want to...
No, it's not. It's not like... The electrodes are in your neocortex. As of right now, most of the device is actually on the outside. It has batteries that need to be changed out.
You mean like the bad guy from Crash Bandicoot?
I've not played those games.
Okay. Well, I'm just picturing this thing just sort of attached to your head.
It doesn't stick out a foot from your head, but...
Can it, if I want it to?
I don't see why not.
Cool. Now you're
But you're not going to get one anyway.
Now you're selling me.
Aesthetics count for way too much with you. You know that?
I think they account for just the right amount.
I'd prefer my brain implant to be sleek and less noticeable.
Yeah, see, I want a giant rocket sticking out of my head. Then I'll get on your Neuralink pad. I'll jump
See,
on
the thing that
bandwagon.
appeals to me about it is, I'm a data sponge.
Yes.
That's kind of my whole shtick. The ability to learn anything relatively quickly that catches my fancy, and not just know it in an abstract sense, but be able to learn it through someone else's experience that I can adapt to my own. That is an intoxicating prospect for me.
It should probably concern you how intoxicating it is.
Yeah, it doesn't. Because I would still be taking that experience and then filtering it to my own.
Brittany just stepped into a bucket of Lincoln Logs and fell to the ground.
You're cut off.
Don't put them next to the chair.
But I need them there
Eating
to-
that potato.
I need the Lincoln Logs there to build the 40K stuff.
All right.
Take that out in post.
No, that is most certainly staying in. We'll move the Lincoln Logs back here so I don't step into the bucket of Lincoln Logs and go full-blown Home Alone.
Or, better idea, don't step in the Lincoln Logs.
It was a rather large tin can.
Clearly labeled Lincoln Logs.
Is it? I'll be damned. Yeah, it is. Anyway.
I kind of look at this as the gateway to building the perfect individual. If not perfect, ultimate individual.
You know what? I don't think we've ever heard that prospect in human history before. This might be a great idea.
No, we've heard it plenty of times. Most notably, at least in my experience, with Cicero and his idea of education.
Go on, go ahead.
Yeah.
We should.
The idea of education isn't to build a model citizen, isn't to build, learn things so you can go make money. It's learning for learning's sake, so that you can do as much as you individually feel you need to be able to do.
Did Cicero ever put that into practice?
He tried. He
How'd that
damn
go?
well tried.
How'd that go?
How'd that go? Well, he was assassinated. by his political enemies.
Okay. How about some other people in history who've had this idea of the constructing the perfect man?
Nietzsche, maybe?
That's a decent one.
And Nietzsche's entire idea for the listening
Ubermensch,
audience.
yeah.
Would you care to?
It's been a while
elucidate?
since I've read, but essentially the Ubermensch just has a lot. It has a lot to do with building a man who is, or developing, I guess, a man who is physically and cognitively. What's a good way to put that? Physically, cognitively, emotionally, as near unbreakable,
Self-reliant.
as near unbreakable and self-reliant as can be managed. I think that's a pretty good way to boil that down. He had his ideas of how to accomplish that.
Wine went
And
down the wrong
that's-
tube.
Yes. He had his different ideas. He has ideas about how to accomplish that. The problem is that other people had different ideas about how to accomplish that, and everybody's going to have a different idea of how to accomplish that.
Yeah, and you know.
And in the places where it has been the most put into practice, it has been an absolute murderous catastrophe.
Where?
Germany, World War II.
Yeah,
The idea of the Aryan
after the
race.
idea of the Ubermensch was corrupted.
Oh, so we just didn't do it right.
No, they took what he said and rewrote it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what he was actually saying.
This is literally the exact same argument that modern Marxists make about communism.
Yeah, except this is provable.
Can it be done right?
Maybe. I feel like you're painting me into a wall as a Nazi now.
No, I'm not painting you in the wall as a Nazi. You're not a Nazi, but I'm trying to get to the point that... The point I'm trying to make is that you have your ideas about what those are. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with extremely...
and you also missed a very important part that was left out from Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, which is he has to decide for himself what that is.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Very, very different from the idea of the Nazi Germany idea of the Übermensch, which is does what the state tells them.
Okay, but we're talking about in reference to Neuralink.
Nietzsche, who, no, you have to come up with this yourself.
Right.
I can't think of a more individualistic standpoint to have.
Okay. But in reference to Neuralink, how do those pieces fit?
You now get to decide what you want to learn, how you want to learn it, how quickly do you get to learn it.
Do you?
Yeah, because you're going to presumably
Yeah, there's the word.
choose what you let into your own brain. Now, this only becomes a problem if it is hackable. To the
You're
extent
building
that
a
you
door.
believe.
Yes. But what can't be denied is that you are building a door. You're building a door to your brain. The presumption that you make is somebody else going to walk through that, or are they going to stay out of respect?
No, the question that you're asking is someone going to barge through it and bust down the door?
Yeah. Well, they don't have to necessarily barge through it and bust down. It could just be a situation where they walk through it. You just didn't know that it was unlocked.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea to have a VPN on that damn thing.
Does that keep people out all the time, especially the people who developed the technology to begin with?
Makes it much harder to get in.
Even for the people who developed
it
the
makes you a
technology?
harder target, that's for damn sure.
Backdoors? No backdoors?
When it comes to VPN, I don't know. I didn't design the software. I don't know if there's a backdoor into it or not.
What I'm saying is that when you do this,
Considering
you
that
are
VPNs
building
were
a
primarily
door.
designed to be as secure as possible. I'd be surprised if they put a backdoor into it. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't be surprised if I looked into it.
Right. But
Now you're
can
also operating again from
this
something that is individually tailored to your brain.
This is something that we do have to come to some sort of consensus on. When you allow yourself to have a Neuralink, are you or are you not, in, we'll say a symbolic way, but it really is kind of literal, are you or are you not building a door to your brain?
Without getting into semantics, you are building a door where normally there would only be a window.
How does the window already exist? Because a window implies that anybody can walk up to it and look in without you really. I mean, maybe you have curtains or something, but we're belaboring the metaphor.
To take that metaphor, with the window, you can really only look out of your own brain.
Why?
You can't really take packages in through a window. I mean, you could if you could open it.
Okay, I'm going to let you continue on this, but I'm worried that we're belaboring the metaphor. But continue. Let's see where this goes.
Oh, you better believe I'm belaboring the metaphor and doing my damnedest to turn it on you. With the door, you don't just have to look out. You can actually go engage with people who are walking by very much face-to-face instead of them shouting through something that may or may not be translating what they're saying correctly.
I see. Okay, I think
right now
maybe
we
a better
have a
way
window. You can look out, and then you have, you know,
why
those
can't people
intercom
look in the
things.
window?
Huh?
Why can't people look in the window?
I mean, they can. They just can't see everything that's going on.
No, but you don't have entire control over what they are seeing. Where in reality, if you
don't have entire control over what people are seeing you right now.
we have a lot more control over it.
Turn off your Alexa.
What?
I mean, you by carrying the smartphone, by putting an Alexa in your house, you are opening up yourself to any kind of spyware.
Don't blame the audience. Yes, but I can control what I'm saying and what I'm not saying to this recording. theoretically.
Yeah, but
Let's not
when
get
you're
into that.
when you're speaking around your phone, around your Alexa, are you censoring yourself?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
I hope you're not looking at porn on this damn thing.
Not on that one.
But on the other one. What I'm saying is the world is already becoming a morass of spyware, of little convenient surveillance devices that we put into our pockets because they are convenient.
Yeah, but it's not in my brain.
This gives you the opportunity to learn very quickly how these things work from the people who built them. Allowing you to build and close off any back door they decided to put in.
You are giving these people a whole lot of credit as far as what type of power they'd be willing to give you over this technology.
Well, if they have the technology, if they decide to put it in themselves, well, and your worst fears are confirmed, well, you're in their brains as much as they're into yours.
That's not true. They are the developers. They get to decide how their brain interactions, how their brain links are going to connect to yours. They're the ones that are developing it. Let's not be naive here. You know that.
Well, now,
they can build their
you're
link.
inferring that this technology allows you to block what you're sending out and what you're receiving.
I'm insinuating that the people who developed it would allow it to do that for themselves.
Right, which means if it's the same technology, the same functionality
Don't
exists.
be disingenuous. You know exactly what I'm talking about. If they're developing it, they can build theirs different than they build ours.
Not really, no. Not because of how it has to work. With that whole AI thing.
No, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. There's been ample examples throughout human history that the
if they're
people
going to
who build,
get as much advantage out of it as can be sold to anyone else, it has to be built the same.
Oh no, they can get more because it's not built exactly the same as everyone else's.
All right, well, the entire advantage comes from more and more and more and more connectivity between each one of them.
You're implying that it has to be a two-way street, and it doesn't.
No, it has to be. If
No.
you're going to get the maximum use out of it, it has to be a two-way street.
No, it doesn't. You can absorb the information from your, what would you call them? Satellites. Maybe that's a good way to think about it.
So
you can absorb
you're-
the information from the satellites, but that doesn't mean you have to send that information back out to them.
No, it does, because you have to be able to reach out to grab it. You have to be able to reach out and selectively pick what you need, which means you have to have read, not just write. And then you're going to say that they're going to put in their own brains things that are write only?
But no.
That's what you're saying, because all they're going to do is pull stuff in. They're going to be writing only. No reading, meaning sending out.
No, they could read, but they get to select what they're going to read. They get to select what those outgoing, I guess for lack of better words, pieces of information.
But in order to make that work,
They're controlling the flow
they
of
have
information.
to have write capability. For them to get maximum
Okay.
use out of it, they have to open themselves up just as much as anyone else.
I don't think it's just as much as anyone else. I think that's an unbelievably disingenuous comment. Unbelievably, because you can compare that to the internet right now. Just because somebody on the internet
That's what I've
wants
been
to
doing
have
this whole time.
somebody on the internet who wants as much information as they can possibly get does not mean that they have to make themselves equally as vulnerable as every other person on the internet. That's insane, and it's not true.
Well, you
It's
get firewalls and
demonstrably
VPNs
false.
and people who actually choose to use them. I'm
Demonstrably
thinking when you put
false.
something into your brain, you're going to choose to use those VPNs and firewalls as much as possible because it is your brain.
If you know enough about it.
Well,
And if you have access to that.
Going to your own argument, it is your frickin' brain. You better be using a VPN or firewall. If not, you're not using this shit responsibly. Maybe we should yank it out.
That got totalitarian real quick. And it only took a few seconds of theoretical conversation about it, not even literal active. We're already in the middle of it. Examples.
Well, we don't let private individuals use nuclear weapons.
But you're suggesting,
I mean, are you
to
saying
belabor that metaphor, you're suggesting that we should.
No, I'm saying... I fail to see how...
It would be beneficial if we
people
gave
don't
everyone
use-
nuclear
We
weapons.
don't let people use nuclear weapons So maybe we should, because you can't use it we don't trust you to use it responsibly, is saying maybe you can't use this technology responsibly, maybe we should take it out.
Maybe we shouldn't give you as an individual access to infinite amounts of information because you won't be responsible with it, but we are, so we'll have access to all that information.
Okay, so you're
just a satellite. All you're doing is grabbing information and sending it back home.
What part of that did I say? Maybe we should take it out. You can't use it responsibly because you're not protecting yourself.
No, that was one of the arguments.
I'm putting this like, okay, it's a retard who likes to run into walls and shit. Maybe we should put a crash helmet on him. That's totalitarian.
Well, if the government comes to your house and you have a kid with a learning disability who's running into walls and they say, well, maybe we should put a helmet on your child.
That's basically what this is.
It feels kind of totalitarian when the government's at your door putting a helmet on your child. Yep. Now it's starting to become obvious that it almost requires overreach.
I fail to see what you're picking up here.
Well, the point that you just made was, okay, essentially, you were saying, well, we don't give nuclear weapons to individuals because...
We don't allow
individuals to own nuclear weapons because, well, I guess giving them somehow the benefit of the doubt that they have the technology to even launch the thing.
No, you don't need to be able to launch it, you just need to be able to detonate it.
Okay, well, the technology to detonate it, whatever it is. We don't do that because they're not going to be responsible enough with it, right?
Well, that individual person can cause a lot more damage with a nuclear weapon than anything else.
How much individual damage could somebody cause if they had access to all of the information in the human hive mind? Even the ones that are up there that are, I don't know, require, whether it's restricted access, top secret, all that kind of happy horse shit. That information would still exist, and the individual person wouldn't have access to it. Those exact same rules might apply to a lot of other information. The government, let's say that the government gets access to this Neuralink technology, which, I mean, come on. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Inevitably.
Right.
And each individual person does end up becoming that sort of satellite for the data collection mothership, for lack of better words. Right?
Again, you're imposing a top-down hierarchy on this.
I think it's likely, and I've already made the point that it's not only possible, but likely. We've already been through that.
And you didn't address the counter.
What was the counter?
By its very nature and its very architecture, it has to be bottom up.
No, we've been talking about that. That's where we went from there. We've got, a minute left?
I don't know.
We got about 3 minutes left. So... essentially, I'm saying that the people who inevitably end up, I think is inevitable anyway, who inevitably end up having primary control over the functioning of this technology are going to have the ability to decide what information gets transferred out to the individual, at the individual citizen level down at our, the peanut gallery, versus how much information they can take in. Patriot Act's a good example of that. They can take in a whole bunch of information about us, but we have very little access to the information that they have about us. Exact same damn situation, and we've already seen it. So it's hard to say that it wouldn't happen.
But no, we're diving into it willingly for the sake of convenience.
What could we have done about it when the Patriot Act was being suggested?
Not buy one of these.
Oh, remember that conversation we had about people need the soft issue there, that people may not be required that they have cell phones, but
you don't need
in order
this.
to function...
You might need this to function, but you don't need this.
You don't think that
you don't need a
significant number of people
do you
at this
or
point,
do you not need a smartphone to get on the internet?
Not to get on the internet.
Okay.
But if you
do you or do you not need a laptop to get on the internet?
I don't know. Do you have a phone?
You could use a desktop.
You can use a desktop.
But, people got convenience. That's what pushes this stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm struggling to understand what your point is here. And you better make it quick because we're running out of time.
Okay. The point that I'm making here is, yes, convenience is going to push that kind of thing. It's going to push the Neuralink. So what we need to be thinking about right now is what limitations to put on it. It's going to happen. Saying, nope, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it, is not doing anybody any favors. It's a very pessimistic way to look at it instead of, okay, this is going to happen. How do we use it ethically? And you already come from the perspective that you can't.
Let the record show that Garrett essentially said resistance is futile. 1 minute.
I'm saying resistance needs to be directed towards something that can actually be done instead of, nope, 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 oh shit. Because we weren't trying to find solutions, we were just trying to deny it. You end up in a totalitarian hellscape instead of being forward-thinking and trying to come up with policies that will stop it from becoming totalitarian in the first place.
Delay it. You're willing to say that it's inevitable that we're going to have the Neuralink. I'm going to say if it's inevitable that we're going to have the Neuralink, it's going to be inevitable over a long enough period of time that Neuralink is going to become essentially a hive mind. And probably end up with emergent artificial intelligence.
The early policies will dictate what kind of hive mind it is. Is it going to be an ant colony?
For how long?
Where you have no free will, or is it going to be a beehive? Where each individual bee does its own thing. Works for the collective good, but can rebel.
All right. We'll go ahead and end it there because we're getting the flag. Well, you were the host for this one, Garrett. What would you... how would you like to end this?